This episode is brought to you by Team Mojo, skills training and coaching for leaders who care about creating engaged and high-performing teams. We support you with communicating expectations, giving meaningful feedback, delegating, and tracking performance. In short, we facilitate team alignment that creates stronger commitment to your organization's purpose. Go to teammojo.ca for more information. Welcome to Suits and Sneakers, a series featuring sage advice and candid conversations with seasoned leaders from diverse backgrounds and styles. I'm your host, Carrie Tuttle. With my guests, we deep dive into the areas of team engagement, motivation, and effective performance management. Get ready to be inspired and transform your approach to leadership. Please like, subscribe, or follow to be notified when episodes are released. Let's get started. Today, I'm delighted to speak with Jamie Smith, co-founder of Amplify Advisors, which focuses on financial strategy for growing businesses. Amplify provides finance leader services, including fractional CFO, fractional controller, and accounting services. Amplify also provides recruitment, including placing temporary and permanent CPAs. In Jamie's role as Chief Experience Officer, she leads the client experience, the CFO team, finance leader services, recruiting services as well. And she also runs communications, marketing, brand, and the employee experience. So you're a busy lady. That might seem an unusual focus for someone holding a CPA, CA, and MPACC, but with a minor in marketing, bean counting might have been the real deviation in her career. Jamie, welcome to Suits and Sneakers.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. So give us a little bit of background on Amplify Advisors and how you kind of started the firm with your partner.
Yeah, so my partner and I met at Deloitte, and we had the opportunity to work there and learn a lot. And we decided that we wanted to focus on the small and medium business space and bring them financial strategies. So when we first started, we launched with CFO services as our focus. Over time, we brought in recruiting, and then we also have the Amplify Tech, where we have emerging ERPs, and we're partners with NetSuite and Acumatica. So we looked at the market and we really felt that the small medium business, which does employ the majority of our society, was very underserved when it came to financial strategy. So there's always been some great players in the market, but they don't necessarily have that best of the big where they understand what great looks like or have had experiences to be trained or work at larger companies and seeing things being done at that best practice level. And so there was a real opportunity in the market to bring that level of experience and resume to these growth businesses that are the driver of our economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know the fractional space is definitely something companies are becoming more open to, and it's really a growing area within all the different sort of functional areas. So, yeah, I find it really interesting that you've gone completely into the CFO on a fractional basis. So, how has your vision for that changed over time and through your growth?
Well, it's interesting because we started in 2018, and when we first started, a lot of our time was spent with education. So we had to explain what a CFO was, and we had to explain what fractional was. So it was a time-consuming sales process, as you can appreciate. And things have changed in our market tremendously. So over COVID in particular, CFO became something that people understood. They understood the difference between their tax accountant and their controller or their bookkeeper and an actual financial leader that was driving strategy. And we're not arrogant. We know that we're just a few years away from people forgetting what a CFO is and why they need it. And we'll be ready to educate again. But with the pandemic, it did help that and show the difference between a CFO and the other types of accountants that are out in the market. And now we're in this new trend of fractional, as you mentioned, where people understand what fractional is. So we no longer have to explain what fractional is and how that gives companies access to a $200,000+ executive that they don't want to commit to their payroll, but they do need that level of actual executive business leadership. And that type of education is becoming less and less because people get it and they're actually seeking it out and looking for it. So
Mhm.
really big changes have happened over the 6+ years that Amplify has been around, and they've been very exciting, and they've helped us grow a lot and do more in the market.
Yeah. Maybe give an overview as well of your team structure. Do you have mostly contractors or mostly employees? How does that work?
We're an employee-based business, so all of our CFOs, controllers, and bookkeepers that are out with clients in the finance leader services are employees of Amplify. Our
Hmm.
recruiters are employees of Amplify, and all of our tech people that are working with the emerging ERPs are employees of Amplify. So we are about 40 plus people in terms of employees. And
Hmm.
then in addition, we have the contractors that we place through recruiting. So when we place CPAs in temporary roles, those would be contractors that are paid by Amplify, but they're not necessarily employees of Amplify.
Hmm.
So we are not a contractor umbrella, which is often people assume that we are, or think that a fractional firm would be. But and there's nothing wrong with being an umbrella of contractors. A lot of great firms are out there doing good work with that model. But Jesse and I, our North Star is client experience, and client experience is driven by the values of Amplify and the culture of Amplify. And in order to really hold people accountable to that North Star, we did find that the employee model was more aligned with the expectations we have on our people. And it's harder to have contractors do it the Amplify way and fully integrate into our culture and buy into our values and deliver client experience when they're not being given the same type of commitment when it comes to employment, right?
Hmm.
In addition, our clients do sign retainer-based contracts that are a year at a time when it comes to the finance leader space, and we want to reduce the turnover and transition as much as possible. And obviously, it's impossible to make it zero because, frankly, most of the time when our CFOs quit, it's because another client stole them. Which is we call it a triple win. It's a good news story,
Yeah.
but when you have employment, you're showing a commitment to reduce that disruption as much as possible.
Yeah, because I can imagine your clients, when they're considering bringing on a fractional CFO, they're looking for some continuity. They need that strategy support, and so having that change of personnel is something they're looking to minimize.
Yeah. And I mean, the nice thing is, even when one of our CFOs is moving to a permanent role outside of Amplify with a client, we do cover the transition and training, and we always have someone ready to step into their shoes. So the disruption is generally very, very low, as opposed to if they went out to market and had a fractional that was just a sole premier.
Hmm.
The cost is covered by us, the training is covered by us, and we immediately fill it. And funny enough, a lot of times they're happier with the second one than they were with the first, because the second person often gets the benefit of coming in with fresh eyes and not in cleanup mode,
Hmm.
right? Versus the first person often had to do so much cleanup that the second person just looks brilliant. Totally off the back of the first person, though, never because they're actually better. But perception is reality, right? And so it's been quite
Absolutely.
interesting to see that almost every time we've had to switch out a CFO, the clients end up happier.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and I imagine the first CFO is establishing some practices and processes as well. So, when you think about how the team structure has changed, I think you shared with me that there was sort of a restructure you had to do at one point, or something like course correct, as far as your organization or your team. Does that
Yeah,
sound
I mean,
familiar?
there's been obviously, you evolve, and it's funny because as a consultant and a business leader and a former CFO, I would tell clients this all the time, and it's just logical, and I get it. You're always going to hit a ceiling in your growth, and then you're going to have to reinvest in order to move that ceiling up. As a business owner, it's very frustrating and annoying every time it happens, because you're like, I thought I was done with investing. I thought I was done with that. But the reality is, we have hit probably 2 to 3 ceilings, and then you got to relook at everything. and decide where the investment and resources have to be put into place in order to move that ceiling up. Now, a business could decide that the ceiling they hit is amazing and good enough, but we are not at that stage. Jesse and I are really looking to still provide financial strategy to more and more businesses and to be part
Mhm.
of more and more communities. So we're actually right now doing a reorg and an investment in order to break through the current ceiling that we've hit. And it is probably the third time that that's happened. And so when that happens, um, Jesse's obsessed with org structure, so that's always the place that gets looked at first. But
Okay.
there's also the need to put technology and process in place, right? We always think about that three-legged stool of people, process, and technology. And to break those ceilings, it's generally investing in all three and just rejigging all three to make sure that you're actually set up for where you're trying to go,
Hmm.
as opposed to set up for where you are now.
Right. So, as you think about like new leaders who might be listening to this, how can they think about the structure? You mentioned the three-legged stool there, in their own team to make sure that they're set up for success and for growth.
Yeah, I mean, the thing when it comes to people, process, and technology, I would say that for the technology and the process, especially, you are very much better off investing early and thinking about where you're going in 3 to 5 years, because the change management, the actual cost of the softwares or solutions, and also the time it takes to put these things in place is significantly less if you do it 3 to 5 years in advance and you're investing in your actual growth and where you're going, right? And you can have much quicker implementations of new process or new technology if you are thinking ahead and forward investing, right?
Hmm.
People's a bit different because obviously if you have an executive team of 5 people at the payroll cost of that, because that's where you're going, like that's not practical. I wouldn't say that you should build your team up before you need it too far in advance, because at the end of the day, what's the most expensive thing on most people's income statement? It's, I mean, no matter the industry, people is always in the top 2 to 3, always, right?
Hmm.
So I wouldn't necessarily invest in the people too early, but the process and technology, always invest early. And always think about where you're going, because it will be cheaper, it'll be less complicated, and it'll take less time. And so that's something Jesse and I've done a great job of. It's funny because people come and work at Amplify and they're shocked by the process and the technology and the support that they get for a company of our size. But we put that effort in really, really early, and it's paid off. And I can tell you that a lot of those things that we built 3 or 4 years ago, if I had to build them now, it would, like, I don't, it would just be so much harder of a rock to accomplish than it was when I did it then. And now I just
Yeah.
have to keep tweaking it and pivoting it so that it continues to fit our business, right? Even
Hmm.
little things like onboarding, right? So we hire lots of people, and so our onboarding is very thorough, and it's a self-serve model with a certain number of touch points. And we invested in that 4 or 5 years ago, and it's paid so much dividends to date, and we get such great feedback. And to do it now would be a much bigger project. So just a small example, like when we did it, we were only hiring a handful of people a year. Now we hire a handful of people a quarter. And
Yeah.
so it's so lucky that we thought to do it then.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people it is an afterthought. They think, well, I got to get somebody on board. And so they're thinking about the recruiting piece of it and they're thinking about all the time they're going to spend interviewing and the criteria that they're looking for. But suddenly now they've got somebody starting and on day one they're like, "Uh-oh, what am I going to do with this person?"
Yeah.
Yeah, so you need to
Totally.
have a plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
just one of many examples, but certainly with technology and process, invest early and believe in yourself. Like if you're telling everyone that's where you're going, put some bones behind it, right?
Mhm.
Put the money and time into the process and technology to get there.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
don't believe it, why is anyone else going to believe it, right?
What's a mistake that you've seen leaders make when it comes to not following that advice on the process and technology?
Well, I think, we see constantly people are at a point where their technologies and processes are 3 to 5 years behind their business. And then they get into this really, like, realistically a total jam, because the reality is it is going to be the most complicated, crazy, and expensive project. So you can totally see why they're resistant to doing it now. But yet at the same time, it's anybody could see that if they don't fix this now, it's a ceiling on their growth, and they're never going to be able to go where they claim they want to go in 3 to 5 years. But it's a hard decision because they legitimately don't have the time to put into it because of the massive size of the project, right? And so the solution to that is still not easy, but it is taking that phase approach, right? And just setting aside milestones of, like, where can we make the biggest difference, and what technologies or processes can we put in to really get us started from a momentum perspective. But it can be overwhelming, right? Because you're trying to boil an ocean at that point.
Yeah.
And at that point, going back to that three-legged stool, you often do have to invest in people then, right? Because the project is so big that you cannot also be lean on leadership and people. You're going to have to invest in people first in order to get the rest done.
Yeah, you almost, depending on the technology you're implementing, like maybe an ERP, you actually need somebody dedicated to the job of project managing the implementation,
Yeah, if
right?
you get to that size, absolutely, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I can see it. Do I have it right that your team is completely remote?
Well, we're remote work from clients. So we have an office space, and people can certainly come to it. And we recently signed a perm lease, so people have access to it, which is great. But we're remote work from clients. So the expectation is that you're integrating and participating in the culture of the client. And so if the client's in person, we're in person. If they're hybrid, we're in person. And then of course there's many that are remote clients as
Mhm.
well. So when the experience delivery team is not at clients, then they can work from wherever they want, really. And oftentimes that would be from home, but they could come down to the office or what have you. And then the teams that aren't on client work, they will work either from here or from home, or a combination of the two. So
Mm,
yes, we're definitely remote though. And like today, there's hardly anyone here. Some days there's more people. It just depends on what's going on, right?
mm-hmm. Do you find it challenging to manage people when everyone's kind of all over the place, or have you got some systems that have helped you?
Yeah, I mean, collaboration is one of our values, and I always talk about how it's a challenging value in the sense that we're remote work from client. But we've always had tools in place and made investments to help that. So there's team events so that people can get to know each other in person and have that opportunity to collide and have relationship building. We have always used technology really, really well to help mitigate the risk of remote work. So there's lots of things that we do to mitigate that risk. But make no mistake about it, it's more deliberate, and there is challenges with being remote, without question. You can mitigate the risk with all the events and the relationships and the resources and the technology, but it's still something that you have to always be conscious of, right? And I
Mhm.
think we're lucky because the type of people we hire are at a business leader level. So it's certainly easier for me and for Amplify to manage a remote working staff than it would be for many of our clients, right? That have a more diverse levels of experience and age, and would have more junior people, right? Versus
Mhm.
the type of work I do, like there's very few of the 40 on my payroll that aren't at a true business leader level. So very different how you manage it, and frankly easier
Yeah.
when it comes to this part, right?
Yeah, that's a blessing for sure. What is some of the feedback that clients give you on the model that you use?
Well, our clients really do see the amplifiers as part of their team, right? And very quickly, they become actually team members. So it's a differentiator that we take very seriously with client experience. We do integrate, participate into culture. We align to the strategy and growth of the clients, and we are putting relationships and people first, and we're living our values. And that's quite different than a typical accountant or consultant or tech person. And what a typical accountant or consultant or tech person would do is a bit more transactional, really high quality work. And I'm in no way disparaging my competitors, and they do great work, but it's just different because of the way that they are outsourced, they're consulting, they're more transactional, and they're getting great work done very quickly, versus we are becoming part of the team, and we do get that feedback that we deliver on that client experience. And so it's different. And some clients may want just consulting, transactional, great work, right? And that those clients, those transactional clients, generally aren't a fit for us, right? And we don't succeed together with those clients.
Yeah, fair enough. And good to know like who you best serve and who you best work with. So yeah, great. You said some of the things that you do to help keep that sense of team. What are some of your favorite collaboration methods and tools?
So, I mean, I think that having that common purpose, which is something that we reinforce constantly, and that North Star of client experience and our values, really makes people feel like a team, even when they're not seeing each other or talking to each other. And it's been quite fascinating how that shared goals and shared how we do it really does make people have an affinity for each other, despite the fact that they never really see or talk to each other. Hardly, it's not like they're regularly spending time together. And so that's been really great. And Jess and I were laughing the other day that, like, our background is consultants, so we didn't even realize that businesses didn't do what they were supposed to do. So when we started Amplify, we did it the way we had already always told clients to do it. And we just thought, well, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
So we had the values set before we even incorporated, actually, because we felt like if we weren't aligned there, then we shouldn't pay a lawyer to incorporate. So we had the values first, and we've always been anchored on that purpose and the values and the North Star. And it's really made a big difference. And I'm so grateful that we were lucky enough to do that early on, because I hear these stories about people who are like, having this collaborative, bring the team together to come up with the ground up values. And I'm just like, oh, I remember selling that even, and it's a nightmare. And so I'm like, I'm just glad that we did it to begin with, and then we hire based on it, and we talk about it regularly. And we do spend a lot of time reinforcing it. We have team meetings where we reinforce it. Every team meeting we reinforce it. We also have our weekly newsletter where it's discussed and reinforced, and it's just a constant expectation, and we're collaboratively talking and experience sharing about that. And it makes people feel like they're part of a team, even when they're not necessarily spending time together.
Well, it's amazing to hear that you actually practice exactly the advice that you give. So
Yeah, well, usually, right?
yeah, sounds like it. Can you talk about also maybe like some challenging staff situations that you've experienced? Because when our listeners, like some of the newer leaders who are listening, that is usually what they want the most advice on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've had lots of employees, so there's been many different cases, and um, I'm not sure which particular story to talk about, but I guess, I'll talk about one that's kind of a hot topic as of late. So we have a lot of ambiguity because we empower our people greatly, and there's that you really do thread the needle with chaos and unclarity and ambiguity, like when you're offering flexibility and empowerment. That's the consequence. And as a leader, you don't necessarily realize that there are consequences to being empowering and to offering work-life flex and to giving people choice. That was kind of a surprise to me. I didn't realize that, oh, by giving people choices, I'm actually giving them stress sometimes because they don't know what choice to make. And so a great example that I've spoken about before, but we did have a person who leaned into work-life flex pretty heavily. And this particular individual would start their day at, say, 8 in the morning, get some work done, then wake up the children, get the children ready for school or what have you. Then they had their kindergartner working at a desk next to them at home in the morning. Then they had their calendar blocked at lunch to bring the kindergarten kid to school, and then get back to their desk. And then they had a good period in the afternoon of flow and proper availability. Then they would end their day at the school bell, so 3:30, 4, whatever. Go pick up both children, feed them, uh, bathe them, bring them to activities, all the regular parenting nightmare that every one of us does 5 days a week. And then they would get back online at, say, 8 o'clock at night and work until 9 or 10, right? So when you look at that, the perception of the human is I've been working my butt off since 7 till 10 every day. That is
Mm.
the experience you're having. That's the perception you have. But if you actually look at the number of hours that you're putting towards clients and client experience and Amplify, you're barely cutting 8 a day, with
Mhm.
all the interruptions. And so that was an example of like someone making choices that were a clear path to burnout. And when you're on the other side of that as a leader, it's hard because you look at that and you're like, I want to support the choices, I want to support the person, but the consequences are starting to come to the team members at Amplify and the clients. And the path is very clear that this is just going to get worse before it gets better because this isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
So that is one example. And I've seen variations of that. And I still do today, where people are making choices, getting burnt out, but then their perception is that, it's because they're working too hard. But it's like, well, it's not the work that's actually burning you out. It's the interruptions and the and the
Mhm.
choices that you're making that are just like causing constant work and stress in your life.
Mhm.
So that's one example of, tough. It's tough because you can see it coming. You want to get ahead of it, but you also don't want to take the choices away from people, right? They have to kind of learn it the hard way, but then once they learn it the hard way, guess what? Then it's a performance management issue.
Yeah.
And yet you knew it was coming.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the way you explain that because some leaders wouldn't necessarily give the person the benefit of the doubt and understand with empathy the way you're looking at it as that person is making choices that they think are okay because of the number of hours or the time on the clock or something like that. But really, it takes, I think they say it's 15 minutes for your brain to redirect whenever you're interrupted. So you're losing productivity in huge amounts when you start adding that up throughout the day. So that's a really
Absolutely.
challenging situation. Thank you for sharing that. How would you describe your leadership style then? Or maybe how would your team describe your leadership style?
That's a good question. I mean, within our values is really the leadership style that is expected of me and that I try to make sure that I'm delivering on, right? And so we have 5 values. I won't talk about all of them, but in regards to leadership, just a few of the ones that make a big difference. So candor is one of our values, and it's based on principles by Ray Dalio, but also Kim Scott's radical candor. And I think when it comes to leadership, it's a great one to talk about. So I absolutely would be perceived by, I think, most amplifiers, if not all amplifiers, to care personally about them as people, but obviously also about Amplify and our clients and our community. So I'd be off the charts in the care personally in many regards. And I do have real relationships with a lot of the amplifiers. Now, obviously, maybe less of them than I used to because there's 40 plus of them. But I have a good relationship with lots of the alumni and people that have previously worked here as well. And they all come through me when it comes to hiring. There's one interview that every single staff goes through that is led by me. So I have some relationship with all of them right from the beginning. And because I have that, I do have their trust and influence and the ability to challenge directly. And obviously, and I'm very, very candid, right? And I do challenge directly, and I can be very direct. But and obviously, sometimes that can be people can be taken back or their feelings can be hurt. But because they also know how much I care about them And if they have any doubts about them because I maybe don't spend as much time with them, they absolutely know I'm coming from a place of caring about Amplify and the community and the clients. So that would be one example. But it's a lot of effort and work to be perceived as caring personally. You got to put a lot of love in the love bucket or the relationship bucket, right? And so it's deliberate effort to earn that trust and earn that influence. And that's one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing. And it's not for the faint of heart, because it takes a lot of energy to make sure that people know you're coming from a place of caring, and then you can challenge, right? So that's one value that helps with leadership a lot. I think that another value that helps, well, they all help leadership, but just to give two quick examples, um, I think curiosity is another one that helps with leadership a lot, right? So people know that that I'm available to them and that I'm here to help. And it might not be the minute you call me, because obviously I have a crazy, messy calendar. But if someone needs me, they can expect that I'll be available and responsive in short order, be it within the day or what have you, right? And my curiosity of like actually caring about all the aspects helps, right? They know that I'm going to be wanting to understand their challenges or their opportunities, and that helps. You earn a lot of trust, and they know that you're a place that they can express those challenges and opportunities. And funny enough, I was saying to someone the other day, a lot of times they dump a story on me, whether it's a challenge or opportunity, and then they like walk away with the answer, and I'm like, I could be a blow up doll, because I swear to God, I don't have to say much. Because with them saying it, they often come to the answers themselves. And so, I
Amazing.
could probably I could have like in this new AI world, I could just have a version of Jamie that sits there and listens, because all it takes is a bit of listening, which is obviously curiosity at its best, and a few questions, and they
Yeah.
usually figure it out themselves. Much, much better ideas than I would have ever came up
Oh, that's amazing though. Like they obviously feel supported by you and that they can open up enough that they may just find some of their own answers.
with. Yeah, sometimes you just need to say it out loud, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. What are you working on now that you would like people to know about?
Well, we've got lots happening definitely at Amplify. One of the things we're doing is a reorg. So we're going into the classic EOS org structure when it comes to leadership. So we're very close to fully taking on these new titles with a COO and a CGO, which is our sales, and then CFO, as well as visionary and integrator. So that's a big step, building a leadership team and hoping that that helps us break the ceiling that I was speaking about and helps us grow. We're very invested in Amplify Tech and getting more and more people on great ERPs. And as a new Acumatica partner, we're really excited about that, because it's very accessible for small medium businesses from a cost perspective and a practicality. So, and Acumatica, they call it client centric, while they call it customer centric. We call it client experience. But it's really interesting how aligned we are as two organizations. So very excited about that. And so there's so much always happening, but I'll leave it at those things.
Oh, well, I love those. Those are really exciting. So, congratulations on all the progress you're making there, and hoping all of the changes in the leadership team take you where you want to go for sure. So, one final question. I love to ask people, when you think back on your leadership journey and the first role that you took on when you first led people, if you could give yourself advice at that time, what advice would you give now that you know what you know?
So I'm gonna tell you two. So one, when I was literally young and a new manager, I think that the lesson that I wish I would have understood, and I wish sometimes I remember even today, because I still fail every once in a while to remember it, is that you do have to lead people the way they want to be led, not the way you want to be led, right? So it's not about the golden rule. What do they call it? The platinum rule. So it's really important to recognize how a person wants to be led, which may or may not be the same as how you want to be led. And so for me in particular, I very much tell me the big picture, tell me the objective, and then get the hell out. But there are people that like to know the steps and the how, and they even like working meetings, surprisingly. Like they want to screen share and work together. And that drives me crazy. But they like that and I like the other. And when you're leading, you have to recognize what they need. It's not about what you would have needed or what you prefer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lesson that I wish I had known much earlier. And I can't deny that I sometimes forget even today. As a leader, when it comes to being a business owner, I would say, there's been a few points where I'm at a point right now and I'm hopeful that I have the same lesson. But, when I first got off client work. And so many business owners experience this that I think it's a worthwhile story.
Yeah.
They want to deliver to clients and be directly involved in the clients and work in the business because they're afraid of the cost associated with it not being them. They're afraid of the risk or that people won't do it as good of a job, etc. But when I gave up client work and my business partner gave up client work about the same time, so when we gave up client work and we started to be leaders within Amplify and only work on the business and no longer deliver to clients, our business grew tremendously. And I mean, let's be honest, every CFO we have is better than Jesse and I ever were. So the client experience got better, the business grew, and it took a lot of courage for us to do that. It was so scary actually for us to work on the business and no longer earn our own salary from actual revenue. But, in some ways we should have done it way earlier.
That's a great, great piece of advice because delegation is one of the hardest lessons to learn as a leader, for sure. Letting go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. What else would you like to share, Jamie?
Well, I think it's always great to get to talk to someone like yourself, Carrie, because I think that there is a great community of business owners. We talked about how small, medium business owners employ so much of our community. And so when there's people like yourself and all the amplifiers that work within our team supporting that community, I think it's a really great thing. And I'm grateful that you have this podcast to highlight that and to help those leaders become better leaders. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much for being here, Jamie. I appreciate everything you shared. We're glad you joined us for Suits and Sneakers. If you want to be an expert guest, look for the link in the show notes. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to be notified of future episodes.